The dawn of December 27, 1969, would mark one of the most audacious intelligence operations of the Cold War in the Middle East. In Egyptian territory, more than 1,200 kilometers from the Israeli borders, a team of special commandos was executing a mission that defied all military conventions of the time. The objective was not to destroy, but to capture intact one of the most advanced Soviet radar systems then in operation, the P-12 Spoon Rest, whose detection capabilities posed a growing threat to Israeli air supremacy in the region. The Arab-Israeli conflict had taken on new dimensions after the Six-Day War of 1967, when Israel significantly expanded its territory, taking control of the Sinai Peninsula, Gaza Strip, West Bank, and Golan Heights. This decisive military victory, however, set the stage for a prolonged confrontation that would extend through the following years. Egyptian President Gamal Abdel Nasser, humiliated by the defeat, categorically refused to accept the new regional status quo and began an intensive rearmament process with massive support from the Soviet Union. The Egyptian strategy focused on building a dense anti-aircraft defense network along the Suez Canal, creating an electronic barrier that could neutralize the technological advantage of the Israeli Air Force. The Soviets, interested in maintaining their influence in the Middle East and testing their most modern equipment against Western technology, supplied Egypt with an impressive amount of advanced weaponry, including SAM-2 surface-to-air missiles, T-54 and T-55 tanks, as well as sophisticated early warning radar systems. In March 1969, Nasser formalized his strategy by officially declaring the start of the war of attrition against Israel. This would not be a conventional war of rapid movements and decisive battles, but a low-intensity conflict, characterized by ambushes, artillery shelling, air incursions, and special operations. The Egyptian goal was clear: to wear down Israeli forces through a prolonged confrontation, breaking the morale of the troops and the civilian population, while simultaneously strengthening their own military capabilities with increasingly sophisticated equipment supplied by Moscow. The heart of this Egyptian defensive system was comprised of various types of Soviet radars, with the P-12 being one of the most important pieces of the electronic puzzle. This early warning radar operated in the VHF band and had a distinctive fishbone antenna, approximately 12 meters long, capable of rotating 360 degrees to detect aircraft in all directions. Its technical configuration included a tower with a motorized system and reduction gears, feeder cables that transmitted signals to a control cabin equipped with computational circuits, target indicators, and display units. Until that moment, Israeli aircraft had operated with relative freedom over Egyptian territory, facing only rudimentary and easily circumvented anti-aircraft defense systems. The situation, however, had dramatically changed with the arrival of the new Soviet equipment. The Egyptian electronic systems became significantly more advanced and dangerous, with detection capabilities that allowed them to track Israeli aircraft from the moment of takeoff. Even when the A-4 Skyhawk, F-4 Phantom fighters, and helicopters flew at low altitudes, attempting to avoid radar detection, they continued to be identified by Egyptian operators. At the Israeli Air Force headquarters, intelligence analysts reached the worrying conclusion that the Egyptian radar infrastructure had been substantially modernized and was functioning with much greater efficiency than expected. Israeli technical intelligence had begun investigations to better understand these new capabilities, but could only obtain vague reports that suggested the presence of a new radar system hidden somewhere west of the Suez Canal. If this information were confirmed, it would mean that within a radius of 200 kilometers, the optimal operational range of the P-12 radar, Egypt would have total control of the airspace west of the Sinai Peninsula. For months, Israeli intelligence attempted to determine the exact location of this mysterious radar. On October 24, 1969, the Israeli Air Force intensified airstrikes against fortified suspected targets in Egypt, hoping to destroy the radar installation. These operations, however, did not achieve the expected results, and the radar continued to operate normally, detecting and tracking Israeli aircraft with impressive accuracy. The discovery finally occurred on December 22nd, 2 months after the start of the targeted attacks, when reconnaissance photographs revealed a suspicious structure located approximately 10 kilometers west of the Gulf of Suez. The images showed what appeared to be two isolated Bedouin tents in the desert, a seemingly harmless scene that would not arouse suspicion in casual observers. The reality, however, was dramatically different. Israeli high-frequency radio direction finding equipment had detected radar signals emanating precisely from that location. Image analysts confirmed that the radar had been installed, camouflaged, and concealed with remarkable expertise. There were no defensive trenches, visible fortifications, personnel or vehicle movements nearby. The path leading to the tents was merely a trail that could have been created by goats grazing in the area. However, by enlarging the photographs, analysts were able to clearly distinguish the radar antenna and generator equipment at the site. The discovery represented a unique opportunity. For the first time, Israel had accurately located one of the most advanced Soviet radar systems operating in the Middle Eastern theater of operations. The Israeli Air Force immediately began planning an airstrike using low-flying aircraft formations to launch a surprise attack against the newly identified target. F-4 Phantom and Mirage fighters, the most advanced aircraft in the Israeli arsenal at the time, were designated to eliminate the radar and definitively neutralize this threat to Israeli air supremacy. The plan followed conventional tactical protocols: low-altitude approach to avoid premature detection, a coordinated attack with multiple aircraft, and complete destruction of the target through precision bombing. It was in this context that Lieutenant Ehil Halor, an intelligence officer in the Israeli Air Force, presented a proposal that would completely change the course of the operation. Instead of simply destroying the radar system, he suggested a much more ambitious and technically challenging alternative: to capture the entire radar system intact and transport it to Israeli territory for detailed studies. This audacious proposal was quickly endorsed by the senior leadership of the Air Force, who immediately recognized the strategic value of gaining direct access to the most advanced Soviet technology available in the region. During reconnaissance missions, the Israelis had already confirmed that the radar site lacked significant anti-aircraft defenses, which would make a capture operation technically feasible. More importantly, the United States demonstrated enthusiastic support for the plan. At that time, the American Air Force was facing serious difficulties in neutralizing Soviet anti-aircraft defense systems in North Vietnam, where equipment similar to the P-12 was causing considerable losses to American bomber formations. Washington hoped that the successful capture of the P-12 radar by the Israelis would provide valuable intelligence on how to defeat Soviet equipment deployed in Southeast Asia. General Moti Hod, commander of the Israeli Air Force, assigned the mission to Major General David Ivry, the officer responsible for ensuring the radar was successfully brought to Israeli territory. The P-12 had been positioned in Ras Gareb, a coastal base along the Red Sea in Egypt, located deep in Egyptian territory, approximately 1,200 kilometers from the Sinai Peninsula, which Israel had taken control of after the Six-Day War. The location was not famous or strategically obvious, just a series of low sand dunes stretching across the area. A shallow stream ran from south to northeast, and dirt roads connected the site to the main highway. The terrain, however, was complex and easily confused, with many similar-looking curves and junctions that could disorient attacking forces. Israeli officers began categorizing the most important components of the radar system. The first was cabin number 2, which contained the display screen and monitoring equipment. Next, there was the vehicle housing the generator and the antenna drive system. Curiously, the radar site completely lacked anti-aircraft defense systems. There were no fences, defensive trenches, or fortified perimeter. 2 generators were positioned near excavated shelters, tents, and oil drums. Israeli intelligence estimated that there were approximately 20 people at the site, including 3 teams of about 18 personnel working in alternating shifts. Additionally, there was a security detachment positioned a few kilometers away and an Egyptian infantry battalion about 12 kilometers from the radar. This battalion was equipped with 12 120mm mortars and various military vehicles. After detecting Israeli reconnaissance flights in the area, Egypt reinforced its anti-aircraft defenses but apparently did not consider it necessary to significantly fortify the radar site itself, presuming that its remote location and camouflage would be sufficient to protect it from direct attacks. This underestimation of Israeli operational capabilities would prove to be a fatal strategic error. The logistical complexity of the operation required specialized equipment capable of transporting heavy loads across long distances in hostile territory. Israel requested CH-53 Sea Stallion heavy transport helicopters from the United States, specifically designed for special transport, rescue, extraction, and assault missions. The Pentagon agreed to supply the helicopters under the condition that any intelligence obtained from the operation would be shared if it was successful. The CH-53 measured 27 meters long and 7.6 meters high, with a range exceeding 1,100 kilometers, thanks to auxiliary fuel tanks and an aerial refueling system. To ensure the absolute success of the operation, the Israeli Air Force selected its most skilled helicopter pilots, who were accompanied by elite paratrooper commandos, veterans of numerous special operations. The Special Forces team trained in secret locations with terrain similar to Ras Gareb. Israel had previous experience using helicopters for capture operations, notably during the 1967 Middle East War, when they transported various captured radar equipment and armored vehicles from Egypt and Syria. Major General Raphael Eitan, responsible for coordination between ground forces and the Air Force, selected 50 elite commandos. The selection included Battalion 50 of the Paratrooper Brigade, the Sayeret Zanhanim, the Paratroopers Elite Reconnaissance Unit, and Israeli Air Force personnel. These 3 units would participate directly in the capture of the P-12 radar. A secondary objective of the mission involved the capture of Egyptian soldiers stationed at the radar site, potentially for exchange for the Israeli officer Dan Avidan, who had been taken prisoner earlier. When the plan was presented to the commanders, the reaction was unanimous. "The plan is excellent. We must execute it." Training began immediately and proceeded with extreme urgency. Exercises were conducted throughout the day and focused on landing and cargo hookup by helicopter. To simulate the real mission, the team used an old P-10 radar found at an Israeli military storage facility in Srifin, along with a Zeal truck captured during the 1967 war. Both were used to practice air transport techniques. 3 CH-53 helicopters were selected to operate at maximum payload capacity. Tests showed that each one could lift almost 4 tons more than their official specifications indicated, a crucial safety margin for the success of the operation. At 9:00 p.m. on December 26, 1969, Israel launched the operation. To divert attention, Israeli A-4 Skyhawk and F-4 Phantom fighters began attacks against Egyptian forces along the western banks of the Suez Canal and the Red Sea. This was a diversionary maneuver intended to draw Egyptian anti-aircraft defense systems away from the real mission. Meanwhile, under the cover of darkness, 3 SA-321 Super Frelon helicopters transported dozens of elite paratroopers, flying at extremely low altitudes while snaking through the Egyptian radar coverage. There was virtually no radio communication, and no navigation lights were used. The Egyptian anti-aircraft defenses failed to detect the incursion, with their attention completely occupied by the fake air attack. To navigate, the helicopters used an oil platform tower to the north as a reference point. From there, after crossing a small river approximately 300 meters wide, they approached the radar station, located just 1,300 meters away. Once the watery obstacle was crossed, the Israeli forces sighted the P-12 antenna, confirming that the site was authentic and not a decoy. The assault team divided into 3 groups. Team Moti, 10 commandos tasked with destroying bunkers. Team Israel, 12 commandos designated to attack the tent area. Team Nehemiah, 15 commandos and technicians focused on securing the power generator and the transport truck. With excellent visibility, Israeli commandos approached from the left flank, about 250 meters from the radar. Lieutenant Shaul led the approach. At 50 meters away, they fired a grenade from a launcher. An explosion illuminated the night and struck the tent where Egyptian soldiers were positioned. It was a powerful psychological shock, but it did not cause damage to the radar equipment. Team Nehemiah crawled towards the target. About 12 Egyptian soldiers were seen fleeing for cover. Machine gun bursts illuminated the scene. Some Egyptians tried to escape, but in a few moments, Israeli paratroopers had flooded the area. The Egyptian defenders were caught completely off guard. Without adequate defenses, they were quickly overpowered. The P-12 radar station was now fully under Israeli control. At 2 a.m. on December 27, 1969, Israeli commandos and technicians quickly disassembled the radar components and prepared the cargo for air transport. Heavy-duty hooks and straps were connected to the CH-53 helicopters hovering over the site. 2 CH-53s that were waiting over the Red Sea moved into position. One helicopter was designated to lift the antenna array and the communications vehicle. The other was tasked with hoisting the command module, which weighed 3 tons, well above the 3-ton external lift rating. Even so, the helicopters strained under the load and began flying towards Israeli-controlled territory. The first CH-53 returned without major issues, but the second, carrying the heaviest load, encountered difficulties. A cable got caught on the side of the helicopter, rupturing a hydraulic line. Veteran pilot Dagan faced a terrible choice: drop the entire command module into the sea or risk losing the aircraft. He chose to proceed, flying dangerously low. Just as he reached the Israeli-controlled coast, he managed to gently land the radar module and land the helicopter moments before it became uncontrollable. A reserve CH-53 arrived to provide assistance in the final phase of the operation. Although the 4-ton radar command module represented an immense challenge for the second aircraft, the Israeli Air Force finally managed to secure the heart of the Soviet-made radar. By the end of the night, a complete P-12 radar system had been successfully stolen and delivered to Israeli territory. The lightning raid resulted in 2 Egyptian soldiers killed and 4 taken prisoner, while the Israeli side suffered only 1 commando injured, an extraordinarily low casualty rate considering the complexity and risk of the operation. Initially, the Israeli government intended to keep Operation Rooster 53 in complete secrecy, treating it as another one of the many special operations conducted during the period of tension with the Arab countries. However, a week later, under growing pressure and public indignation from Egypt, Israel was forced to hold a press conference acknowledging the operation. Even so, they categorically refused to return the P-12 radar system, arguing that it was legitimate military equipment captured during combat operations. Israeli and American signals intelligence experts immediately began dissecting the intact P-12 radar system. This analysis revealed extraordinarily valuable information: 4 operating frequencies, the radar's transmission power, its main coordinate tracking mechanism, and the method used to display targets on the oscilloscope. Every detail of the Soviet-made P-12 spoon rest radar was exposed and meticulously documented. The technical findings were impressive. The radar could detect an aircraft with a radar cross-section of 1 square meter flying at 500 meters altitude from 45 kilometers away. For targets flying above 10 kilometers altitude, the detection range extended from 200 to 360 kilometers, depending on atmospheric conditions and aircraft size. The system operated across 4 frequency bands, capable of resisting both active and passive jamming. The setup time was 6 minutes, while complete deployment and dismantling required 90 minutes. The antenna rotation speed varied from 0.5 to 6 revolutions per minute, allowing for different operating modes depending on tactical needs. The most critical discovery involved the 4 specific frequencies and the P-12 radar's blind spots, information that was now in the hands of the United States and Israel. This knowledge effectively neutralized a major anti-aircraft defense threat, helping Israel maintain air superiority over the region during the subsequent years of the War of Attrition. Eventually, the radar was handed over to the United States military, as were other Soviet-made equipment Israel had previously captured, including S-75 surface-to-air missile systems. The bold and urgent execution of the operation left even experienced military leaders impressed, declared Lieutenant General Haim Barlev, who would later become Israel's chief of the General Staff. Indeed, the operation represented one of the most remarkable technical intelligence successes of the Cold War. demonstrating how small nations could gain significant strategic advantages through well-planned and executed special operations. In 1966, Israel had already orchestrated the defection of an Iraqi pilot, convincing him to deliver a MiG-21 fighter jet to Tel Aviv. Subsequently, during another conflict, they had obtained a complete SAM-2 surface-to-air missile system from Soviet stockpiles. Now they possessed the P-12 spoon rest radar. Stealing an entire radar system deep in enemy territory amidst the volatile Middle East conflict added another chapter to Israel's long history of audacious and unprecedented operations. The detailed technical analysis of the P-12 revealed specific vulnerabilities that could be exploited by electronic countermeasures. Israeli and American engineers identified frequency patterns, pulse timing, and signal processing characteristics that would allow for the development of targeted jamming systems. This technical intelligence would later be applied both in the Middle East and Vietnam, where similar equipment posed significant threats to Western air operations. Conversely, the Egyptian failure stemmed from deficient surveillance, lack of adequate site protection, and underestimation of the possibility of such an audacious operation. The Egyptians relied excessively on their Soviet-supplied equipment, presuming that its presence alone would be sufficient to deter any threat. This over-reliance on technology, without adequate consideration for physical security measures and operational procedures, revealed a fundamental flaw in Egyptian defense doctrine during this period. The capture of the P-12 radar also highlighted significant differences between Israeli and Arab operational philosophies. While Israel emphasized special operations, tactical adaptability, and maximum exploitation of limited opportunities, its Arab adversaries tended to rely on numerical superiority, advanced equipment, and conventional military doctrines. This disparity in approaches would continue to influence subsequent conflicts in the region throughout the 1970s. The operation also demonstrated the growing importance of technical intelligence in the Cold War. The ability to gain direct access to adversary equipment provided strategic advantages that transcended immediate military value. Each captured system provided insights into industrial capabilities, technological development priorities, and potential vulnerabilities that could be exploited in future conflicts. For the United States, access to the P-12 radar was particularly valuable, as they faced similar systems in Vietnam, where North Vietnamese anti-aircraft defenses caused significant losses to American bomber formations. The cooperation between Israel and the United States in this operation also illustrated the increasingly complex nature of alliances during the Cold War. Although Israel maintained considerable operational independence, it recognized the value of sharing intelligence with its main Western ally. This partnership benefited both countries. Israel gained access to advanced equipment and logistical support, while the United States gained valuable insights into Soviet technology and special operations tactics. The psychological impact of Operation Rooster 53 extended far beyond its immediate military value. For Israel, it demonstrated that even though territorially small and numerically inferior, it could conduct deep special operations in enemy territory with remarkable success. This operational capability served as a strategic deterrent, suggesting that no enemy target was truly safe, regardless of its location or apparent protection. For Israel's Arab adversaries, the operation represented a significant humiliation and disturbing evidence of Israeli intelligence and special operations capabilities. The Soviet reaction to the capture of their advanced equipment was mixed. Publicly, Moscow condemned the operation as a blatant violation of international law and an act of unjustified aggression. Privately, however, Soviet engineers were interested in understanding exactly how their systems had been compromised and what countermeasures could be developed to prevent similar incidents in the future. Subsequent analysis led to significant modifications in deployment and security procedures for sensitive equipment supplied to Third World allies. For Egypt, the consequences of the operation were particularly bitter. In addition to the loss of valuable equipment and the human casualties suffered, the incident exposed fundamental vulnerabilities in their defense and intelligence capabilities. The relative ease with which Israeli forces penetrated deep into Egyptian territory conducted a complex operation, and escaped with minimal losses raised serious questions about the effectiveness of the Egyptian armed forces and their ability to protect strategic installations. The operation also had broader ramifications for the regional balance of power in the Middle East. The demonstration of Israeli operational capabilities influenced strategic calculations of other Arab countries, which began to question their own vulnerabilities to similar special operations. This concern led to significant investments in the security of military installations and the development of defensive special operations capabilities throughout the region. The technical analysis of the captured P-12 radar also revealed interesting aspects of technology transfer during the Cold War. The equipment represented one of the most advanced radar technologies available at the time, incorporating significant innovations in signal processing, electronic displays, and multiple target tracking capabilities. The Soviet willingness to provide such advanced equipment to allies demonstrated both the strategic importance Moscow attributed to the Middle East and its confidence in Egyptian security capabilities, a confidence that would prove to be misplaced. The success of Operation Rooster 53 also influenced special operations doctrines worldwide. The demonstration that a small, well-trained and adequately equipped force could capture intact strategic equipment in deeply hostile territory inspired military planners in various nations. The techniques developed for this operation, including air-ground coordination, precision night operations, and heavy transport logistics, became case studies in military academies and special forces training centers. For the Western intelligence community, the operation represented a paradigm on the value of direct operations versus traditional intelligence gathering methods. While electronic intercepts, reconnaissance photographs, and human agent reports could provide valuable information about adversary capabilities, nothing compared to direct physical access to the actual equipment. The ability to dismantle, analyze, and test complete systems provided insights impossible to obtain through other methods. The technical cooperation between Israeli and American engineers in the radar analysis also set important precedents for technical intelligence sharing. The protocols developed during this project served as a model for subsequent collaborations involving captured Soviet-made equipment. This cooperation was particularly valuable because it allowed both countries to maximize the value of the intelligence obtained, applying it to their respective operational challenges in the Middle East and Southeast Asia. The timing of the operation was also strategically significant. Conducted during the height of the war of attrition, it demonstrated Israel's determination to maintain technological superiority even when facing increasingly advanced Soviet equipment. This demonstration of operational capability during a period of heightened tension sent clear messages to both adversaries and allies about Israeli strategic intentions and capabilities. Operation Rooster 53 remains one of the most notable intelligence operations of the Cold War, standing out not only for its operational audacity, but also for its lasting strategic ramifications. The ability of a small nation to conduct such sophisticated operations in distant hostile territory demonstrated that in the modern era, traditional geographical or numerical advantages could be offset by superiority in training, planning, and tactical execution. The lessons learned from this operation continued to influence military and intelligence doctrines for subsequent decades, setting standards for special operations that remain relevant to this day. The legacy of the operation extends beyond its immediate military impact, serving as a paradigmatic example of how tactical innovation, international cooperation, and the exploitation of limited opportunities can produce strategic results disproportionate to the initial investment. For scholars of the Cold War and Middle East conflicts, Operation Rooster 53 represents an exceptional case study on the intersection between technology, geopolitics, and special operational capabilities during one of the most tense periods in modern history.